Last year I was living there for 3 months.
Goodness me.
Yes. So,
And for you to have some time.
There is a certain kind of person who walks into a room and changes the temperature of it entirely. Not because of what they're wearing or the title they carry, but because of something far harder to fake, something raw, something real. And in a world where royals are trained from birth to smile on cue, stand at the right angle, and never, under any circumstances, let the mask slip, Princess Catherine keeps doing something that no one in that institution seems prepared for. She keeps being human, and every single time it happens, the internet stops. Comment sections fill up, people cry at their phones without knowing exactly why. And somewhere deep down, millions of people feel something they didn't expect to feel when they clicked on a video about a princess. They feel seen. So here's what this video is. It is not a highlight reel. It is not a surface-level tribute. This is a deep dive into the moments when Princess Catherine completely abandoned the carefully constructed image of what a royal is supposed to be, and in doing so, became something far more extraordinary. The moments get heavier as we go, so stay with it, because by the time we reach the last one, even the most skeptical viewer in the comments is going to feel something they weren't ready for. Let's start from the beginning. A promise made to a little girl with leukemia. Cast your mind back to 2020. The world had essentially shut down, borders were closed, hospitals were overwhelmed, families were being separated not by distance, but by glass, by windows, by fear, by a virus that no one fully understood yet. And in the middle of all of that collective grief and uncertainty, Princess Catherine launched the Hold Still Project, a nationwide photography initiative that invited people across the UK to document their pandemic experience through images. The goal was simple but profound, to capture the human truth of what people were actually going through. Not the statistics, not the press briefings, the real, lived, emotional weight of isolation. Tens of thousands of images came in, and among them was one photograph that stopped Catherine completely. A young girl named Mila Snedden, just 5 years old, had submitted a photograph of herself pressed against a window, looking out at her father and sister on the other side of the glass. Not because of lockdown restrictions alone, but because Mila was only 4 months into chemotherapy for leukemia, and in order to protect her dangerously weakened immune system, her father had to live outside. Every single day he would come to the window. Every single day they would see each other but couldn't touch. Think about that for a second. A 5-year-old child, understanding her father is right there on the other side of the glass, and not being able to reach him. That photograph said everything without a single word. The video call that changed everything. Mila became one of the finalists of the project, and that meant she got a video call with Princess Catherine herself. Now here's where it gets extraordinary, because this could have been a polished PR-managed moment. Catherine could have smiled, said a few kind words, and moved on. That's what the protocol playbook would suggest. But what actually happened was something completely different. Catherine leaned in. She engaged. She asked Mila about her father in the photograph. She asked her whether it was hard not seeing him. She asked if Mila had to be a very brave girl. And when Mila told her she was surprised when her dad finally came back into the house, Catherine's entire face softened in a way that no amount of royal training can produce. And then, and this is the part that broke the internet, Mila asked if the princess had a costume. Catherine laughed and said she wasn't in one right now, and then she asked Mila what her favorite color was. Pink, Mila said without hesitation. And Catherine, without missing a beat, made a promise to a 5-year-old cancer patient she had never met in person. I have to make sure I go and find myself a pink dress, so that hopefully when one day we get to meet, I'll remember to wear my pink dress. That could have been one of those nice things adults say to children and then quietly forget. The kind of empty promise that disappears into the gap between intention and follow-through. But Princess Catherine is not that person. When they finally met in person, Catherine walked in wearing pink, every detail exactly as she'd promised. And the look on Mila's face when she saw that dress, that is what genuine human connection looks like. Not performed, not staged, a promise made to a sick little girl and kept down to the color of the fabric. And the story gets even more emotional, because after 2 long, grueling years of fighting leukemia, 2 years of chemotherapy, of windows instead of hugs, of a childhood spent in waiting rooms and clinical corridors, brave Mila finally rang the bell. The bell that cancer patients ring when their treatment is over. 3 times, one for each word. I am free. There is not a person with a functioning heart who can watch that and feel nothing. And Catherine, who had built a real connection with this little girl, knew exactly what that moment meant. This was not a royal visiting a patient for a photo opportunity. This was something far more meaningful. The Eurovision moment nobody saw coming. But here's the thing. The Catherine who made that promise to Mila is the same Catherine who, in 2023, made the entire world do a double-take during the Eurovision Song Contest Grand Final. Eurovision, for the uninitiated, is one of the most watched live music events on the planet. Hundreds of millions of viewers tuned in from across the globe, and the show was being hosted in Liverpool on behalf of Ukraine after Kalash Orchestra's historic win with the song Stefania. The stakes were enormous. The attention was international. The stage was as big as it gets. And then, without any warning or announcement, a video played on screen. A woman sat down at a grand piano, and it took the audience exactly 3 seconds to realize who they were looking at. Princess Catherine, the future Queen of England, was playing the piano, not symbolically, not for show, not as a brief ceremonial gesture. She played a full instrumental arrangement of Stefania, the Ukrainian winning song, with genuine skill and poise. Calm, collected, quietly extraordinary. The collective reaction was immediate. Social media went into meltdown. The clip went viral in every country that was watching. Headlines appeared in dozens of languages, and somewhere in the middle of all of it, people were asking the same question: how did we not know she could do that? That is the power of restraint combined with genuine ability. Princess Catherine has been playing piano for most of her life. She was not performing for applause. She was doing something she genuinely loves, in service of something larger, using her platform to honor Ukraine in one of the most visible ways imaginable. The Eurovision appearance wasn't just a viral moment, it was a statement that there is more to this woman than protocol and appearances and carefully worded speeches. There is talent, depth, and a sincere desire to use her position for good. I wish we could do more. The whisper that went viral. Now let's talk about a moment that received far less fanfare, but arguably says even more about who Princess Catherine truly is. When families began fleeing Ukraine following the Russian invasion, community centers across the UK opened their doors, and Princess Catherine visited one of them. No elaborate ceremony, no grand entrance, just a princess walking into a room filled with traumatized mothers and their children trying to find a way to be genuinely useful in a situation that defies easy solutions. What she did next is the part that stuck with people. She didn't stand at a polite distance. She didn't deliver a rehearsed statement and pose for photographs. She moved through that space the way someone moves when they actually care. Slowly, attentively, person by person. And when she encountered a mother who was in tears, she didn't stiffen or call for an aid. She sat with her. She listened. She comforted. She took photographs with the woman's daughter. But the moment that truly got people, the moment that spread across social media with captions in multiple languages, was when Catherine was overheard quietly saying, almost to herself, "I wish we could do more." Not for the cameras, not for a speech, just an honest, unguarded whisper of genuine helplessness in the face of suffering she couldn't fix. That is not something you can rehearse. That is conscience speaking. And if you watch the footage closely, you can see it on her face. The real weight of standing in front of displaced families who have lost everything and knowing that your ability to help, however significant, still has limits. That kind of emotional honesty in a public figure is so rare that most people don't know what to do with it when they see it. The girls who nearly forgot their own names. Let's talk about something that sounds simple, but is actually quite revealing. In the year that followed her wedding to Prince William, Catherine was already breaking the mold. During a public engagement, she spotted a group of girls in the crowd, clearly waiting, clearly hoping, clearly doing their best not to completely lose their composure at the sight of an actual princess. Catherine noticed them, walked over, and started chatting with them like it was the most natural thing in the world. And then she took photos with them. Now, if you've seen the footage, You already know what happened next. The moment Catherine turned to leave, at least one of those girls produced a reaction so visceral and overwhelmed that it became one of the most shared clips of that particular royal engagement. Oh my God! 2 words, completely unfiltered. And that is the effect this woman has, not because she performed something extraordinary, but because she was warm and accessible in a space where most people expect cold distance. That's the paradox of Princess Catherine. She holds one of the most prestigious positions in the world, and she uses it to make people feel like they matter, like they're worth stopping for. The barefoot moment that said everything about her character. Now, this next moment is one that seems small on the surface, but once you understand what it says about her character, it becomes genuinely significant. During a visit to a Hindu temple in Leicester, Princess Catherine joined a group of worshippers dancing inside the temple. In itself, that's already a lovely, culturally engaged moment from a senior royal. But here's the detail that tells you everything. She did it barefoot, not because anyone asked her to, not because a protocol brief had told her to remove her shoes, but because she looked around the room, saw that every single person in the circle had removed their footwear out of respect for the sacred space, and she quietly did the same. No announcement, no gesture toward the cameras. She just took her shoes off and joined in. That is cultural intelligence. That is the difference between performing respect and actually having it. Anyone can smile for a multicultural photo opportunity. Very few people notice the unspoken customs of a space and adapt to them instinctively, without being prompted, without making it about themselves. It would have been so easy to remain in her shoes. No one would have said anything. It wasn't technically required of her. But Catherine understood that real respect means following the lead of the people in that space, not standing apart from it while smiling. When the future queen forgot about the cameras, there is a version of royal life that is all armor, composure, ceremony, distance. And then there is the version that Princess Catherine seems to insist on living, which includes the occasional moment of absolute, unguarded joy. During a visit to Longmeadow Cider in Northern Ireland, Catherine and Prince William joined members of the family-owned business to make traditional potato apple bread. And what started as a royal engagement turned into something that felt remarkably like a normal afternoon, with Prince William cracking jokes that absolutely nobody asked for, and Catherine laughing in that genuine, whole-face way that no media training in the world can manufacture. When William's bread rolled out looking considerably more rectangular than circular, the room erupted. Someone gently pointed out that it wasn't quite the right shape, and William, with the energy of a man who has fully accepted his role as the family comedian, looked at it and said, essentially, that this was a new variety nobody had seen before. Catherine laughed. The staff laughed, and for a moment, the cameras caught something that palace aides probably hadn't penciled into the schedule. 2 people who are genuinely comfortable with each other, genuinely delighted to be somewhere unexpected, and genuinely unconcerned with performing dignity at the expense of a real moment. The emoji answer that sent the internet into chaos. The same unscripted energy appeared during a separate interview when the couple was asked about their most used emoji. Catherine gave the dignified answer, a red heart. William, meanwhile, seemed to briefly consider whether his actual answer was appropriate for public consumption before landing on a response that sent the room into chaos. These are not publicity stunts. These are glimpses of a couple navigating the impossible weight of royal life while somehow still finding room for actual joy. And every time the world catches a glimpse of it, something relaxes. Something feels more human. The campaign that proves she's playing the long game. But now the tone shifts, because not every story in this video is about warmth and laughter and viral piano performances. Some of them carry real weight, and this next moment is one of them. In 2023, Princess Catherine launched the Shaping Us campaign through the Royal Foundation Center for Early Childhood, a campaign focused on the profound importance of the first 5 years of a child's life. The research is well established. The emotional, cognitive, and psychological foundations laid in early childhood have lifelong consequences. And yet, as Catherine pointed out in the campaign video, these years receive a fraction of the attention, funding, and social priority that they deserve. What made the campaign resonate wasn't just the statistics or the policy implications. It was the simplicity and sincerity with which Catherine spoke about it. She didn't approach it like a briefed politician ticking a box on the calendar. She spoke about early childhood development with the kind of fluency and passion that only comes from years of genuine personal investment in a cause. During this time, we lay the foundations and building blocks for life. It is when we learn to understand ourselves, understand others, and understand the world in which we live. For a woman who will one day be queen, choosing early childhood as the cornerstone of her public work is a quietly radical statement. It says, "The things that happen before children are old enough to remember them matter more than most of society is willing to admit, and I am going to use every bit of platform I have to change that." That kind of sustained, focused advocacy, not headline-grabbing, not dramatic, just consistent and committed, is actually harder to maintain than any single viral moment. And it speaks to a version of royal purpose that goes beyond ribbon-cutting and appearances. She walked back into the hospital that treated her cancer. Now prepare yourself, because this next moment is the one that hits differently once you know the full context. In 2025, Princess Catherine visited the Royal Marsden Hospital. For most public figures, a hospital visit is a gesture of solidarity, meaningful but fundamentally symbolic. You arrive, you shake hands, you take photographs, you leave. But Princess Catherine's visit to the Royal Marsden was something completely different. Because the Royal Marsden is not just any hospital to her. It is the hospital where she received treatment for her own cancer diagnosis. Let that land for a moment. This woman, who had spent months navigating her own private battle with cancer, who had made the carefully worded public announcement in early 2024 while fighting to protect her children from the full weight of that reality, who had spent one of the most frightening periods of her life in the corridors of that very building, walked back in, not as a patient this time, but as someone who had come out the other side and who chose to use that survival to sit with people still in the middle of the fight. She met with patients currently undergoing treatment. She looked them in the eye, she sat with them, and she personally thanked the medical staff who had cared for her, the people who had been part of one of the most vulnerable, frightening chapters of her life. There is something almost unbearable about the courage that takes to walk back into the space where you were most afraid, to stand not in triumph or performance, but in solidarity, to say to another cancer patient through your presence alone, "I was here too. I know what this room feels like, and you are not alone in it." The weight of that moment was visible. Catherine was heard acknowledging the work being done in that hospital with a depth of feeling that only someone who has personally experienced it could access. This was not a princess visiting a hospital. This was a survivor going back to sit beside the people still fighting the battle she had just come through. And if you watch that footage and feel something tighten in your chest, that is not sentimentality. That is recognition of something rare. Someone choosing vulnerability over performance. Someone using the hardest experience of their life to be present for others. The Wimbledon standing ovation that made the whole country exhale. The same year that Catherine was navigating her cancer diagnosis and treatment, something happened at Wimbledon that no one was quite prepared for. The Wimbledon women's singles final in 2025. Billie Jean King, one of the greatest tennis players and advocates the sport has ever produced, was in attendance. The match was underway, and then Princess Catherine walked onto center court. The crowd rose, not politely, not in the performed obligatory way that crowds sometimes applaud public figures out of social expectation. They rose with the energy of people who had been worried about someone and were relieved and overwhelmed to see her standing there. A loud, sustained, emotional standing ovation that stopped the moment entirely. And here is what makes that moment extraordinary beyond the obvious. This was Wimbledon, a sporting event. The eyes of the world were on the tennis court. And yet for those minutes, the most significant thing happening in that stadium wasn't the match. It was the collective exhale of a country that had spent months quietly holding its breath. Catherine had fought cancer. She had stepped back from public duties. She had been absent in the way that only happens when something serious is being dealt with privately. And then there she was, standing on center court, having come through it, visibly moved by the reception she was receiving. The commentators barely needed to say anything. The crowd reaction said everything. Her words on mental health that no one expected. Now let's talk about World Mental Health Day. Because in a world where mental health is still treated in many circles as either a weakness or a trend, Princess Catherine has been one of the most consistently vocal senior royals in pushing against that stigma. Her speech on World Mental Health Day was not filled with vague platitudes about the importance of being kind. It was specific. It was urgent. It called for the creation of safe spaces, genuinely safe spaces, where people can talk openly about their emotional struggles without fear of judgment or dismissal. And it framed mental health not as a personal failing, but as a collective responsibility. It is now vital we spend more time focusing on how we talk about mental health and, crucially, what we're going to do to build positive, preventative solutions to one of today's toughest challenges. Coming from someone who has navigated the palace's famously complicated relationship with emotional transparency and who has watched up close what happens when that transparency is denied, these words carry a particular weight. Catherine is not speaking abstractly. She is speaking from a position of real, lived understanding of what it costs to keep things in, and what it can mean to finally be heard. And that is the thread that runs through everything in this video. It is not that Princess Catherine is unusual because she has emotions. Everyone has emotions. It is that she refuses to pretend she doesn't. In an institution built on the performance of composure, she keeps choosing honesty. Quietly, consistently, without drama, she keeps choosing the human response over the royal one. The hospital break room moment that stopped everyone cold. And then there is the moment at Charing Cross Hospital during a visit to the NHS alongside Prince William. The couple had gone to surprise nurses during their tea break, a visit designed to show support for the staff who had also personally supported them through their own health journey. The overlap between their private experience and the public gesture was not lost on anyone in that room. During the conversation, one volunteer mentioned something that will be familiar to anyone who has ever worked in a caring profession. The feeling that the work you do goes unnoticed, that the soft, invisible labor of compassion doesn't register on performance reviews, that empathy doesn't show up on a CV. And Catherine, without hesitation, said something that has stayed with people who heard it. She said that soft skills, empathy, compassion, kindness, can go far beyond a job description, are often the most powerful things a person can bring to another human being in a moment of need. It is not a complicated idea, but it is a radical one when it comes from a future queen standing in a hospital break room looking at people who spend their lives giving more than they receive in return. And it landed the way it did because it didn't feel like a speech. It felt like recognition. When she ran toward a fan and left protocol in the dust. Let's bring it back to a moment that, in some ways, encapsulates everything this video is about. During a royal engagement in Scotland, Catherine was walking through a crowd. The usual choreography of a public appearance, the careful balance between connection and security, when she saw someone, a fan, waiting with flowers, hoping, and she ran toward them, not walked briskly, not gestured for an aide to collect the flowers. She ran, like a person who simply wanted to get to someone faster than protocol would allow. The security detail, trained, professional, composed, had approximately 10 seconds of looking genuinely stressed about the whole situation, and the crowd around the moment went electric. Because here is what that split-second decision communicates. I see you. I am not performing accessibility. I actually want to be close to you. The distance between us is not there because I want it to be. It is a structural requirement of the role I carry, and when I can close it, I will. Royal protocol is built on distance, managed access, controlled interaction, and every time Catherine breaks it, not recklessly, not carelessly, but with the clear and deliberate instinct of someone who values the people in front of her over the rules she's supposed to follow, it chips away at the mythology of the untouchable royal. She is not untouchable, she is choosing to touch. What all of this actually tells us about Princess Catherine, and that is, ultimately, the story this entire video is telling. Princess Catherine exists within one of the most image-conscious institutions on the planet. Every appearance is scheduled. Every outfit is analyzed. Every word delivered in public has been, at some level, considered. That is the nature of the role. That is what it means to carry a title that belongs in some sense to an entire nation. And yet, somehow, in the middle of all of that, she keeps finding the cracks. She keeps finding the moment where a little girl asks about a pink dress and she makes a promise she actually keeps. Where a displaced mother breaks down and she stays in the room with her. Where a crowd at Wimbledon rises in relief and she is visibly moved by what it means. Where a hospital corridor carries the memory of her own fear and she walks back into it to sit with someone else's. These are not the moments that fit the script. They are the moments that exist despite the script. They are what happens when a person with genuine emotional intelligence is given one of the most public platforms on earth and chooses to use it honestly. The question this video leaves you with is a simple one. How many of those moments have you seen? Which one reached you? Because if you're reading those comments, and if you've made it this far, I think you already know the answer. Drop it below. Tell us which moment hit you hardest, because you're not the only one. And Princess Catherine, in her own quiet and persistent way, would probably say that's exactly the point. If there is one thing this video proves, it is this. In a world of performance, authenticity is the most radical thing you can offer. And this woman keeps offering it, over and over again. Even when, especially when, no one told her to. If this video moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Subscribe for more stories that go beneath the surface. And leave a comment below. Which moment made you feel something you weren't expecting?